Hello, and thank you for downloading Witness on the BBC World Service with me, Farhana Haider. And today I'm taking you back to early November 1984, when India was gripped by anti-Sikh killings. It all happened following the assassination of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi by two of her Sikh bodyguards on the 31st of October that year.
We regret to announce the death of the Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi. She was critically injured this morning at her residence, and she was immediately rushed to All India Medical Institute, where she succumbed to her injuries.
Within 24 hours, Hindu mobs armed with voters' lists were attacking Sikhs in their homes. One small suburb in Delhi, Trilokpuri, a poor Sikh colony of narrow alleyways and tenement housing, saw the worst of the bloodshed.
We never
thought the result would be any violence towards Sikhs, that so many would be killed. We never knew.
Mohan Singh, a 29-year-old auto rickshaw driver, lived in Trilokpuri with his wife and 3 children, as well as his parents and 2 brothers.
We lived in the block 32. Near us was block 36, and we saw smoke rising from fires there. Lots of people came running towards our house yelling, "They have burnt the Sikh temple." Our block also had a Sikh temple, so we thought they will burn our temple as well.
From this studio I can see the smoke from fires burning in 4 different directions. 2 miles away a man has been burnt alive. Gangs of Hindu youths are roaming the streets shouting slogans against Sikhs and burning taxis. Police have just reported that Sikhs in one temple in North Delhi have opened fire on a crowd attacking them. In New Delhi's main temple, Sikhs have armed themselves with swords, lead-headed staves and sticks with nails in them. We've just learnt that the army has been called out in the capital.
The mob would douse the doorways of home in kerosene. Everyone had narrow wooden doorways, tiny rooms, and they would set fire to the door. As the smoke filled into homes, people would begin to suffocate and eventually be forced to emerge. As they emerged, the mob would douse them in kerosene and burn them alive.
All around Delhi today, as we've moved from area to area, we've seen people being chased off the streets and beaten with lathis, those long sticks the Indian police wield. We've watched the police trying to get curfews imposed in their areas. But we've also seen in places police standing by while people looted shops. We could see people breaking into the shops, even fighting amongst themselves for the booty.
Sikh men keep their hair long as part of their religious traditions, and they wear turbans to cover it. As the mobs got closer and closer to Mohan Singh's home, he tried to make himself less of a target.
At night on the first day of the riots, I escaped. I went to the Indian Express office. I was terrified. We all were. I managed to escape by cutting my hair. My sister-in-law lived near our home. I snuck over and used her scissors to cut my long hair. Of course, it wasn't a very neat haircut. I then went to the local police station. But the police took one look at me and said, "He's obviously a Sikh who has cut his hair. Thrash him." Even the police were trying to hurt us. So I ran.
Mohan Singh eventually made it to the office of the Indian Express newspaper, where he met reporter Rahul Bedi and begged him to come to his neighbourhood to report on the horrifying events taking place.
I went along with 2 other colleagues to this place, and as we neared this block where this alleged crime was going on, we were blocked by a huge mob of people, and they asked us where we wanted to go, and we said we wanted to go to block 32, and they said, "Sorry, it's just not possible," and they were very threatening, and they started throwing stones at us.
Rahul Bedi and his colleagues went to the police headquarters to try to raise the alarm about Trilokpuri, but they were ignored. Eventually they headed back to Trilokpuri alone, little prepared for the gruesome reality of what they were about to encounter.
The army had been deployed in Delhi to control the rioting, but there was no army around. We came back to the block. Whenever I think about it, my flesh crawls, and it's just a horrible, horrible thought, because it was dark and the streets were very narrow, And on these two particular streets, there were about maybe 300 or 350 Sikh families. So when we arrived back there, we got to this place, this block 32. And I mean, if you can just imagine, there was not a sound. It was absolutely quiet. And they just watched the twin lights of our headlights moving towards this block. And we stopped about maybe a few feet away and we got off. And we were surrounded by thousands and thousands and thousands of people. There was a van standing there with just one light, I still remember, and it belonged to the local police station. And there were maybe one or two policemen in it. As we walked towards this, the crowd parted. And there were three of us, myself and two of my colleagues. And in this street, it was just littered with bodies. We couldn't have... I could not, none of us, all three of us, we could not put our foot flat on the ground, because if we had, we would have stepped on either a body or a limb or somebody's hand. And literally, we were walking tiptoe because when this young man, Mr. Mohan Singh, had come and alerted me, the massacre had begun. And the locals would come, they would slaughter a few Sikhs, go home, come back and begin the slaughter again. At the end of that evening, the death toll in just these two narrow streets, I think there were about 320 people who'd been killed. The story appeared the next morning in the Indian Express. Everybody was completely aghast.
Police arrived in Trilokpuri only after the Indian Express had published details of the killings. Mohan Singh says that Rahul Bedi and the Indian Express coverage stopped the killing, and then he himself went back to Trilokpuri.
They reported the story and saved many lives. The reporters evacuated a lot of women.
A camp was set up nearby for the women and children of Trilokpuri.
When I went to look, there were about 2,000 or 3,000 people there. I looked for hours. Then I found my parents, my wife, my children. Then they told me that both my brothers had been killed. I was devastated. I wept and thought, how could this happen? They took everything from us. There was nothing left.
When the Indian army finally restored order 4 days later, at least 400 Sikhs lay dead in Trilokpuri, with hundreds more injured. According to official figures, nearly 3,000 Sikhs were killed, and members of the ruling Congress party were widely accused by Sikhs of encouraging the violence. There have been several inquiry commissions and investigative committees into the 1984 anti-Sikh riots, but only a handful of people have been prosecuted for the Trilokpuri killings.
It was a pogrom against Sikhs. I mean, it's the most disgraceful, I think, chapter in Indian democratic India's history.
What do you think is the legacy of the anti-Sikh riots that took place in 1984?
Well, time is a great healer, and Sikhs are not looked upon with the same kind of suspicion as they were soon after Mrs. Gandhi was killed. But to my mind, looking back on those events where the state is complicit and there is no justice, I think the state loses a certain amount of legitimacy. And I think a lot of the mess that we are in today is as a consequence of this complete and total lack of accountability.
Rahul Bedi is still based in Delhi and now works as the India correspondent for Jane's Defence Weekly and the Irish Times. Mohan Singh and his family now live in West Delhi. Their home in Trilokpuri was destroyed. They never went back. That's it for this edition of Witness with me, Farhana Haider. For details of our complete range of downloads and our terms of use, go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.